Well, folks, gather round because things have been getting rather spicy down here in South Africa, or as we call it, Mzansi. Today is the 26th of May, 2025, and let me tell you, the political climate is hotter than a Durban curry in December. Our beloved country, often seen as a beacon of hope and reconciliation, a rainbow nation noble, now finds itself squinting under a rather harsh spotlight, and the OKE holding that spotlight, none other than former, and it seems current, President Donald Trump and his administration over in the good old US of AJ. It's a situation, hey, it's not just a gentle summer breeze of concern either. We're talking about a proper high-vel thunderstorm of accusations. Serious stuff, a whole laundry list that makes you sit up and spill your rooibos. They're saying our government is up to some dodgy business, implementing anti-white policies, grabbing land like it's a free-for-all at a braai, and even some heavy claims about human rights abuses. And as if that wasn't enough drama for one season, there are also murmurs, loud murmurs, about South Africa cozying up to groups like Hamas and countries like Iran. Aish, it's a lot to take in. So what this essay plans to do, my friends, is to unpack this whole tangled mess. We're going to dive headfirst into these unfiltered exposés, like an uncle at a family gathering who's had one too many brandies and decides to tell what he thinks. We'll look at the claims being thrown around, why they're being made, and critically, the pretty drastic actions the United States government has decided to take in response. It's not just talk, it's action, the kind that has real consequences, you see. It's crucial, not just for us South Africans trying to figure out what's what, but for anyone watching from afar to get a handle on these developments. These aren't just headlines, they are events that could reshape our nation's path, our standing in the world, and the daily lives of ordinary South Africans. So buckle up, because it's going to be a bumpy but hopefully informative ride through the current state of our beloved and currently rather stressed Mzansi. Sharp, sharp, let's get into it, shall we? Now, if there's one topic in South Africa that's guaranteed to get temperatures rising faster than a politician's blood pressure during question time, it's land. Ah, land. It's not just soil and grass here, it's history, it's identity, it's pain, and it's a promise of a more equal future that many feel is long overdue. The legacy of colonialism and apartheid carved up this country in ways that left deep, deep scars, with the vast majority of fertile land concentrated in the hands of a few. So land reform isn't just some policy idea, it's a burning necessity for justice and redress. But, and it's a big but, the way this reform happens, or is perceived to be happening, is where things get complicated. The Trump administration by early 2025 wasn't just whispering concerns, they were shouting them from the rooftops, specifically citing South Africa's land seizure policy as a major red flag. This became one of the key justifications, apparently, for the US decision to turn off the economic assistance taps. They painted a picture of a government running roughshod over property rights, which, as you can imagine, doesn't play well on the international stage, especially with certain investors. The South African government, for its part, has consistently argued that its land reform efforts are about correcting historical injustices and promoting more equitable access to land for agricultural and residential purposes. They talk about processes, about legal frameworks, about doing things in an orderly fashion, even when discussing expropriation without compensation as a potential tool. However, the international narrative, heavily amplified by figures like President Trump, often focused on the more alarming interpretations, stoking fears of widespread, chaotic seizures targeting specific groups, particularly white farmers. This narrative gained serious traction, and long before Uncle Sam decided to weigh in so heavily, these debates and the uncertainty surrounding land policy were already causing headaches at home. Investor confidence is a skittish beast at the best of times. Throw in unresolved questions about property rights and the future of land ownership, and it tends to bolt for the nearest exit. So this land question was already a source of internal tension and economic jitters, well before it became a major point of contention in US-SA relations, making the whole situation even more complex. Right. So let's talk about these anti-white policies allegations. This is a heavy one, a real powder keg of a claim, especially in a country with South Africa's history. The US government under President Trump, particularly around February and March 2025, didn't mince words. An executive order was signed, and it specifically called out the South African government for supposedly implementing policies that are discriminatory against its white citizens. Now that's a direct hit, like a googly from a Proteus bowler, hitting middle stump when you least expect it. What exactly are these alleged policies? Well, the American statements often pointed towards the experiences of white farmers as President Trump publicly amplified claims about their mistreatment. It's likely that policies designed to promote black economic empowerment, BEE, and affirmative action, which aim to redress the economic imbalances created by apartheid, are being interpreted, or some would argue, misinterpreted through this lens. While the intention behind BEE is to uplift the previously disadvantaged majority, critics, especially from afar, sometimes frame these as discriminatory against the white minority. The executive order signed by Trump in February 2025 was quite explicit in its criticism of these purported anti-white and, interestingly, anti-American policies. It suggests a view from Washington that the South African government's domestic agenda was not only internally problematic from their perspective, but also somehow hostile to American interests or values. This framing is significant because it links domestic policy directly to international condemnation and subsequent action from a global superpower, which is a serious escalation of diplomatic pressure. It's also worth remembering as a bit of context that this isn't an entirely new tune from certain circles in the US. The Trump administration had, in a previous term, even talked about or set up a refugee program specifically for white Afrikaners from South Africa, citing concerns about their safety and treatment. So, while the intensity and the direct governmental accusations in 2025 were a step up, the underlying sentiment had been simmering in some quarters for a while, now boiling over into official policy pronouncements. Beyond the very specific and racially charged accusations, the Trump administration also cast a wider net, citing broader concerns over South Africa's human rights record. This wasn't just about land policies or alleged discrimination against one group. It was a more general critique that painted a picture of a country failing to uphold fundamental human rights to a standard expected by Washington. This broader concern became another pillar supporting the US decision to take punitive measures against Mzansi, adding another layer to an already complex situation. These human rights concerns were apparently serious enough for the Trump administration to take a significant step. By March 2025, South Africa was officially booted off the list of countries eligible for US economic and financial assistance. That's a big deal. It's like being uninvited to the global cool kids party. This removal wasn't just a symbolic slap on the wrist, it signaled a fundamental reassessment by the US of South Africa's standing and its commitment to what Washington deems acceptable governance and human rights practices. President Trump even brought up these human rights issues in seemingly unrelated contexts, which shows how pervasive this view had become within his administration. For instance, there was a story about Secret Service protection for Hunter Biden during a visit to South Africa, and Trump reportedly referenced the country's human rights situation when discussing that. It's like when your parents are upset about your messy room, and suddenly that becomes the reason you can't borrow the car. The core issue bleeds into everything. Now, it's important to consider this from multiple angles. While the US administration under Trump had its specific list of grievances, South Africa, like many countries, does face ongoing human rights challenges documented by local and international organizations. These might include issues like police brutality, conditions in prisons, gender-based violence, or service delivery protests sometimes being met with excessive force. Whether these align directly with the Trump administration's specific focus or were used opportunistically is a matter for debate, but it adds to the overall complicated picture of human rights in the country. Section 5. The presidential pen Trump's executive order shakes the nation. February 2025. Remember that month because that's when President Donald Trump picked up his pen and signed an executive order that sent shockwaves all the way from Washington, D.C. to Waterkloof. This wasn't just another tweet or a passing comment. This was official. This was the American government, through its highest office, drawing a very clear, very thick line in the sand regarding its relationship with South Africa. It was a moment that signaled a dramatic downturn in relations, making everyone sit up and pay attention. So, what did this executive order actually do? Well, its most immediate and headline-grabbing provision was the halting of US funding to South Africa. Just like that, the tap was turned off. For a developing nation like ours, which has historically received various forms of American aid, think PEPFAR for HIV, AIDS, development assistance and other programs, this was no small thing. It was a direct and punitive financial measure designed to make the South African government feel the pinch and to send an unmistakable message. The order didn't pull any punches about why this drastic step was being taken. It explicitly laid the blame on the South African government's alleged implementation of those controversial anti-white policies we talked about earlier. Furthermore, it directly accused Pretoria of providing support to designated groups such as Hamas and to nations like Iran. These justifications, listed out in black and white, effectively labelled South Africa as a problematic actor on multiple fronts, at least in the eyes of the Trump White House. The fallout was immediate. Imagine the scene: government officials in Pretoria scrambling, diplomats buzzing, and everyday South Africans wondering, "Aish, what now?" This executive order wasn't just a policy document, it was a statement. It told the world that the US, under this administration, was prepared to take strong action against a nation it once considered a key partner in Africa. The implications were, and still are, massive, affecting everything from diplomatic ties to economic forecasts and our country's overall international image. Section 6. Choosing company accusations over Hamas and Iran ties. Now let's delve into another rather thorny part of this whole saga. The American accusations that South Africa has been getting a bit too chummy with groups like Hamas and countries like Iran. This isn't just about who you invite for tea. In the world of international relations, your choice of friends can land you in seriously hot water, especially with a superpower like the United States. The February 2025 executive order from President Trump made it clear that these associations were a big part of Washington's unhappiness with Mzansi. From the American perspective, these relationships are, to put it mildly, problematic. Hamas is designated as a foreign terrorist organization by the United States government, so any perceived support, whether material, political, or even just rhetorical, for Hamas is viewed extremely negatively in Washington. Similarly, Iran has had a deeply antagonistic relationship with the US for decades, facing sanctions and accusations related to its nuclear program and regional activities. So, South Africa being seen as an ally or supporter of Iran definitely raises red flags for the Americans. South Africa's foreign policy, however, often marches to the beat of its own drum, a drum that sometimes plays rhythms from our history. Our government frequently emphasizes principles of solidarity with liberation movements, as Hamas is viewed by some, despite the US designation, a commitment to dialogue even with controversial actors, and a desire for a non-aligned stance in global power plays. Historically, the ANC itself received support from various international sources during the anti-apartheid struggle, and this perhaps shapes its willingness to engage with groups and nations that are shunned by the West. But intentions aside, the geopolitical reality is that these alleged ties have serious consequences, particularly when a major power like the US decides to make an issue of them. The executive order explicitly linking these relationships to punitive actions like funding cuts demonstrates that South Africa's foreign policy choices are not made in a vacuum. They have a direct impact on how the country is perceived and treated by influential global players, forcing a difficult balancing act between historical allegiances, sovereign foreign policy, and pragmatic international relations. Section 7. The money tap closes economic pressure from Washington. When the United States decides to halt funding, it's not just a symbolic gesture, it's a move with real teeth. The executive order signed in February 2025 did exactly that. It cut off US financial assistance to South Africa. Now, Mzansi has received significant aid from the US over the years, most notably through PEPFAR, the President's emergency plan for AIDS relief, which has been absolutely vital in our fight against HIV/AIDS. There's also been support for various development projects, education and governance initiatives. Losing this isn't like losing spare change down the back of the sofa. Compounding this, South Africa was also formally removed from the list of countries eligible for US economic and financial assistance by March 2025. This is more than just the immediate loss of current aid programs. It's a downgrade in status. It signals that the US no longer views South Africa as a priority partner for such assistance, perhaps even seeing it as a country whose policies are actively detrimental to US interests or values. This kind of delisting can have a chilling effect beyond just government-to-government aid. The broader economic impact is something we have to watch very closely. While the direct aid amounts might be a fraction of South Africa's national budget, the message this sends to international investors and markets can be far more damaging. It creates an atmosphere of instability and political risk. Questions arise about other preferential trade agreements like AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which is crucial for many South African exporters. If one major partner signals such strong disapproval, others might become wary too. Naturally, the South African government would have had to react to these financial and economic pressures. One would expect strong denials of the allegations that led to these measures, perhaps condemnations of what might be seen as American overreach or interference in domestic affairs. There might have been attempts to open channels for dialogue, to clarify positions, or to negotiate a way out of this tight spot. But the immediate reality was one of significant economic and diplomatic pressure being applied by a very powerful global actor. Section 8. A diplomatic door slams, the ambassador's unceremonious exit. As if cutting off the funding wasn't dramatic enough, the Trump administration then took another very serious step. They expelled the South African ambassador to the United States. Yeah, you heard that right. Our top diplomat in Washington was essentially told to pack his bags and catch the next flight home. This wasn't just a sternly worded letter or a cancelled meeting. This was a full-blown diplomatic escalation, the kind of move that signals relations have gone from bad to worse, teetering on the brink of truly hostile. In the carefully choreographed dance of international diplomacy, expelling an ambassador is like throwing a stink bomb onto the dance floor. It's a deeply symbolic and highly unusual action, typically reserved for situations of extreme tension or when one country accuses another of egregious behavior, like espionage or severe interference. It immediately severs a key channel of communication and sends an unambiguous message of profound displeasure. It says, "We are that unhappy with your government." One can only imagine the atmosphere surrounding this expulsion. It would have been incredibly tense, probably quite acrimonious. The ambassador, representing our entire nation, suddenly persona non grata. This action by the US government was designed to isolate South Africa further, to amplify the pressure already being applied through economic means, and to publicly shame the government in Pretoria on the world stage. It's a power play, pure and simple, demonstrating the serious consequences of falling foul of Washington's policies. Now, the big question following such a move is always about reciprocity. Did the South African government retaliate by expelling the US ambassador from Pretoria? Diplomatic convention often dictates a tit-for-tat response. However, the research notes provided don't specify this, so we focus on the impact of the US action. Whether Pretoria chose to escalate further or tried to de-escalate, the expulsion of its ambassador was a significant blow, damaging diplomatic infrastructure and making any potential resolution of the underlying issues even more challenging. It's a tough situation when your main point of contact gets kicked out. Section 9, Mzansi's tightrope walk navigating a future fraught with challenges. So here we are in May 2025, looking at a situation that's frankly a bit of a mess. South Africa finds itself grappling with a potent cocktail of serious accusations from a major global power. Accusations ranging from its domestic policies on land and race to its foreign alliances and human rights record. And these aren't just words. They've been followed by some pretty hefty actions from the Trump administration, including funding cuts and the expulsion of our ambassador. The unfiltered exposé, as it were, has laid bare some deep and troubling fissures in our international relations. The potential long-term impact on South Africa's international standing could be quite severe. When the United States takes such a strong stance, other Western nations, and indeed international bodies, tend to pay close attention. There's always the risk of a domino effect, where other partners might reassess their own relationships with Mzansi. leading to further isolation or pressure. Rebuilding trust and repairing a tarnished image on the global stage will be a monumental task, requiring astute diplomacy and perhaps some serious introspection. Domestically, these external pressures are bound to have significant repercussions. How will the South African government respond? Will it lead to a defiant doubling down on current policies, framing the US actions as an infringement on sovereignty? Or could it trigger a period of reflection and potential policy adjustments to appease international concerns and repair damaged ties? This will be a critical test for our leadership, balancing national priorities with the undeniable realities of global interdependence and power dynamics. Ultimately, Mzansi is at a crossroads, facing a treacherous path ahead. The challenges are immense, calling for transparent governance, a steadfast commitment to upholding the human rights of all its citizens, and incredibly careful navigation of the complex currents of international relations. The dream of a prosperous, stable, and respected South Africa, that rainbow nation we all aspire to, depends on making wise choices now. It's a wake-up call, a stark reminder that our actions, both at home and abroad, have profound consequences. Let's hope the path chosen leads to a brighter future.